I don't know if you've ever had moments like this, but sometimes when I'm thinking about the person I'd like to be rather than the person I am, I imagine or I dream of a kind of superhero scenario, where I get that call from my better self telling me there's a desperate need for me to change it up. And I imagine that I could step into a phone booth, click my heels together maybe, and suddenly I would be changed, transformed into a better and more loving person. And usually what I'm thinking about are not things like leaping tall buildings in a single bound or catapulting an evil villain into oblivion. I'm usually just wishing I'd made a different small choice in the moment, that I'd given someone a few more minutes of my attention, that I'd left a bigger tip, or offered kindness instead of criticism, or maybe that I had stepped back and given someone space to be their true selves. And wouldn't it be great if such a phone booth existed, where we were instantly transformed into the people we want to be? What does it mean to truly be in relationship with one another, maybe even with everyone around us? I don't expect many of us really know what that would be like, to have true kind of universal relationship. Let's just say that to truly be in relationship means to have a deep and meaningful connection with others built on mutual respect, trust, open communication, empathy, a genuine understanding of others' needs and perspectives. And it exists when we and others feel valued and supported, and it's something beyond what casual interactions or superficial connections can offer us. Such relationships, true ones, feel very you to me. Trust, respect, understanding, relationships that are value-based or love-led, living in ways and in relationship with others that align with what it means to live ethically with love at the center of who we are. Now, I expect that even if you may not feel you have many relationships that can be characterized this way, you can at least imagine them. So just put a pin in that for a moment and let me go someplace else entirely. I've been studying a little book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. It was written in 2017, which might as well be 2024. In it, Snyder says that we must examine history to understand the deep sources of tyranny and then to consider the proper responses. He goes on, using lessons from history, to offer 20 suggestions for how to respond. And those suggestions run the gamut from defending institutions to being wary of paramilitaries. So, what does that have to do with building true relationships? What's tyranny got to do with this? Well, tyranny, simply put, is the usurpation of power by a single individual or group, or the circumvention of law by rulers for their own benefit. Tyranny's goal is to divide us, to isolate us, and to make us fearful, all in the interest of power and control. Tyranny believes that some people are better than others. So without putting too fine a point on it, there is good reason to study this book at this time. In fact, several of Snyder's recommended responses involve having strong and true relationships, and let me just highlight a few. One suggestion is that we take responsibility for the face of the world. I'll tell you what that means. Consider the swastika. As their prevalence rose in the 1930s, these symbols of hate became part of the everyday. They were on the store windows that they were meant to be on. And in that way, helped to enable the terrible reality of the Holocaust. They were normalized. They were normalized as a part of what everyone saw. And that made othering of Jews and non-Aryans more and more acceptable So Snyder says, don't show loyalties to symbols like that. Instead, take responsibility for the face of the world, for what we see. Insist that symbols that embrace all of our fellow citizens be the norm. Demand that the face of the world be one of understanding and respect and acknowledgement of the inherent worth of all. Something that can only happen when we engage in communities that foster these values, communities where true relationships are built. Another suggestion for responding to fascism: make eye contact and small talk. Even the smallest amounts of connection matter. Because whenever we look away or cross the street to avoid contact, fear grows within us, within others. So affirm everyone with a smile, with eye contact, with small talk, and in that way you can contribute to everyone feeling better, feeling safer, feeling like they belong. Taking a moment to make real connection matters. Then Snyder says, practice corporeal politics. Corporeal politics, essentially that means be with others, be a part of the body of the people. We have to engage with people of various backgrounds, even with those we don't agree with about everything. Be with people, be in relationship, because that's the only way to strengthen our connections. Now, these are just 3 of the 20. But Snyder's suggested responses to tyranny are really painted with very broad strokes. But actually doing any of these things in the interest of better relationships is not as easy as it may sound, because it takes multiple, ongoing, relentless, persistent, small attempts to connect, to include, to care. Even when we're afraid, even when we're angry, even when we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Especially then, we are being called to lean into relationship and to choose life-giving connections. And of course, Snyder isn't the only one talking about this. Some of you may have seen an opinion piece in the Washington Post last week, written by Perry Bacon Jr., where he listed 5 things to do instead of doom scrolling about Trumpism. Now, all of them are about joining things. And one of his 5 recommendations, really the second one on his list, was to join a UU congregation. Just as our new members have done today. Because there, says the author, one can work together on concrete, discrete, local issues and openly discuss shared values and ideals. So this place, this UU congregation, can be a great laboratory for practicing and being in relationship. We already espouse common values. You are already deeply committed to local social justice work, all of which offers a really firm foundation on which to build true and lasting community. We cannot afford, and so we cannot allow ourselves to be divided and conquered by fear and mistrust. Not now, really not ever. And to choose lives led by love and connection rather than fear and mistrust is, well, it's a choice. It's potentially, for many of us, a new way of being. A bit ago, I asked you to put a pin in that place where you might imagine what strong and true relationships look like and feel like. So let's go back to that place now. Yesterday, I officiated for a celebration of life for a man known by a few folks in this congregation who died in a tragic accident in September. Those who spoke created a beautiful picture of a man who gave of himself, selflessly, quietly, humbly, in service of his family and his friends and his community. And his young adult son spoke so eloquently of this generational farm family that had weathered along with the seasons, like their farm, the passage of life and death, and how all this was connected to change and the eternal, change and the eternal together, snow and blossoming and the birds and migrations and love of community and lessons passed on generation to generation. Isn't this the community that we might wish to be part of? Actively participating in an interconnected web of relationship across time and space and generations, and insisting on the simple intricacy of tended connections. Tended through hard times and times of joy, working side by side to sustain what matters most to us. Now, we don't know what is to come. Some of us are sure that what's ahead is the end of democracy, the beginning of a time of fascism and hatred. We can't stop that doom scrolling and bellyaching and kvetching, all of which seems to me to contribute to tearing things down rather than stitching them together. So how can we together embrace this alternative way of being? Perhaps the only control we have, really it's true, the only control we have is over how we respond and how we treat each other, and the choice of love and connection over hatred and division. It reminds me of that beautiful poem written by Judith Hill after 9/11 called Wage Peace. Some of you are better familiar with it. She suggests that we could transform firemen and rubble into flocks of red-winged blackbirds. We could transform terrorists into freshly mown fields. She writes, play music, make soup, learn to knit a hat, act as if armistice has already arrived. Act as if. I think what this all implies is that if we lean into what brings us life, if we choose putting our energies into connections over those things that will only numb us and push life away, if we choose being in right relationship to life itself, to let love and our values lead us, then true, strong relationships with others will follow. It is indeed a matter of trust, of choice, and perhaps in these times, a matter of will. We will not be taken over by the forces of tyranny. I don't think I have to tell you what the elements of good, true relationships are. Like I say, I think that somewhere inside of you hold better pictures of this than you even know. We all recognize good, true relationships when we have them, when we see them. We know they involve trust and open communication and respect and careful listening. We've heard this all before. And yet, choosing community, choosing relationship over materialism, over technology, especially in these times, is the most revolutionary thing we can do. Like you, I have been told over and over that we humans are built for connection, that we're not meant to exist in isolation. Like you, I've heard countless times about the great value to be found in community. I've read over and over again about MLK Jr.'s vision for a beloved community, a vision of a new society grounded in values and truth and relationships, strong, true relationships, and yet we don't choose it. We're not there yet. King constantly pointed out that we increase our strength and our unity by refusing to respond in kind to the forces of violence and terrorism. And that's what makes building community so revolutionary. Community, caring for each other and for the planet, is resistance. And how? Well, perhaps it's about a willingness to be present to this alternative and countercultural way of being, holding that picture of right relationship out in front of you as a lodestar, bringing it both to consciousness and to the present moment, and then acting from this place. No, I'm not going to push through and rush. I'm going to take time to sit with this person and listen. No, I'm not going to throw insults at newscasters and politicians. I'm going to take a big breath and go out into my days with the intention to act with kindness. No, I'm not going to isolate myself. I'm going to choose community. However hard or complicated, I will choose relationship. However challenging, I will show up and offer my presence as the gift to the world that it is. You know, this is a time that's going to require greater commitment to this community. In the coming weeks, you'll begin to receive invitations to engage in the work of planning for FUS's future. And while this isn't the only way to build relationships, I hope that you will choose to participate, because whatever is swirling and storming in the world around us, we can continue to show up and be present for one another and to lean into life and possibility and vision for new ways of being, to resist all the pressures to isolate and become fearful. Building strong relationships of care and attention is the revolution. As is often my practice, I will end with a poem, this one assuring us that we don't need a magic phone booth. We can change. We can learn new lessons about what really matters in life. It's called What You Missed That Day You Were Absent from 4th Grade. And it was written by Brad Aaron Modlin. Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how not to feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's voice. Then the class discussed falling asleep without feeling you'd forgotten to do something else, something important, and how to believe the house you wake in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks, and how not to squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also, that you have enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy, the one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost and one person add up to something. It all adds up to connecting. We can change, we can learn new things. Your life matters, and indeed it adds up to something wonderful and relational. And in the words of Wayne Arneson, take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone. Let us make it so.